Why have software teams abandoned upfront design? Let's get into it. Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support said they're coming out Tuesday for that. We'll see. Today I'm reacting to Frederick Christensen. Why have software teams abandoned upfront design in regards to adventure-driven development? This is just another one of my series, and basically I'm getting down into this little sections about some of the implementation, like how to, these are just suggestions, by the way. These are not formulas. These are not checklists of how to plan out some of this stuff. And I'm talking about mostly this assembly, the tavern assembly, or the planning phase after you've set up the team. And you guys usually, people usually on this adventure-driven stuff, they usually kind of come together really organically, and they handpick each other because they're kind of in this area already, or thinking about these areas, or have skill sets that may be complementary to other things. And so let's talk about a little bit about Christian, what Frederick has to say about upfront design.
Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about the art of software design. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that software teams have abandoned upfront design, diagrams, documentation, and modeling? Is the art of software design getting lost? Nope. I wouldn't say so, and I don't really think that it's necessarily the case that people have abandoned these practices. I will.
They actually have. So Frederick has worked at maybe better places than I have, especially after 2012 when I came back to software development after taking a break after selling my company, my startup, and took a break for about 8 to 10 years, somewhere in that range. It's hard. It all kind of blends together there. But I came back and these practices were involved, and yeah. So the one I saw that was immediately like strange is there was no upfront design. They had completely abandoned any kind of design up front. They just started coding and then designing it as they went. I'm like, okay, you're not going to talk about some like how this thing could look, what we're kind of pointing at, not all the details of every damn thing, but like maybe the screens or what needs to be involved. It's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do that along the way. I'm like, I asked them, are we planning on this like a rough draft? We're throw it away. No, this is going to go to production. We're going to production with this. I'm like, okay. And I tried it. I've tried it several times, and I've actually brought up this point that there has to be some design up front. We can't just start right into the coding phase before we kind of understand what's going on and how we can all coordinate our different areas. Like, no, we're just going to stamp on each other's toes. This is how we do it. I'm like, really? And it wasn't just one company. So Frederick's been at different, probably better companies maybe than I've been. But this practice that I'm talking about is the most common practice. His is the exception. Let's keep going.
I'll say that these are the practices of someone who has on average had a different role in the past at the very least. So the argument I will make is that a lot
of companies, because there's the academia fell down on this particular issue, how to design these things. They just lead code grind. We'll do the algorithms and data structures, and that's all you need. Not this other set of knowledge. Like, how do you set these projects up so we can actually work as teams? It may not be possible. The answer may not be that we cannot industrialize a creative process. It's knowledge work. It has to be treated differently. And there has to be some design up front if we're going to have some sort of product that at the end that somebody wants. And that because we kind of know in the beginning we're actually hitting a problem, and there's a way to deal with this issue that we're trying to deal with, whatever the thing is we've identified. Not just start coding. Oh my God.
For a traditional architect, these are the tools of the trade for the most of the time. And the thing is that you leverage different things to different degrees, in my opinion, depending on what sort of tools you feel most comfortable with. So in the traditional setup, an architect may,
if you get real handy with a hammer, everything starts to look like a hammer. I know it's so strange that people would think they would do that. Yeah, when people only know how to use a screwdriver, they're gonna use it as a hammer. They're trying to look. I can chisel with it. I can poke some holes with it. Look, it's like a drill. If I really crank on it like this for about an hour, it'll drill a hole. It's like, come on, guys.
May or may not have been someone who has a fairly good understanding of software development. It might have been someone who was a software developer, but at some point, especially when you become an enterprise level 1, you abandoned usually the daily coding.
Right. So this is the industrialization of software development. This has been the common thing in the zero interest rate environment. Whenever you got these money for free, and they just hire a bunch of people, and they expect everything to be, oh, if it takes 9 months for one woman to give birth to a baby, well, if we get 9 women, we get them all pregnant, we'll have one baby in a month, right? No. Now industrial, yes. Knowledge work, no. When we get down to the actual thing we're producing, yes, you can ramp that up and scale it up, whatever. And the distribution and the industrial mechanization of actually producing the software on the end, we used to have to put it on floppy disks and stuff. It's like now that's just deployed on the cloud. So we're not even that problem has been solved. Now it's this other thing. What problem are we solving for people? What are we doing for people that adds value, that justifies my damn job? And justifies that how I can take somebody else's job that's not doing it as good, because these things, everything's being handled right and now, and one way or another, whether it's well or not, it's all problems are being handled in some way. So your job as a developer, an entrepreneurial, and engineer is to figure out where you can add value and justify your position. So, and that means somebody else's, either the old way they're doing it, or the people that were doing it are going to lose their jobs. That's just what we're doing here. I know it's crazy that people don't talk about this, but this is what we're doing. So you have to get in the middle somewhere. That's the whole thing. Not how can we make this code everybody get code at the same time. It's like, no, what are we building? Maybe we shouldn't code this. Maybe this is something that's not even wanted or needed by anyone. We just get money for free and just buy a bunch of engineers and throw and a square root of the number of engineers are going to be working on it anyway. So if you have 10 engineers, 5 of them are going to be, what's the square root of 10? I don't know. The square root of 10 is that's the number of the people actually going to be working on it. They're going to be doing 50% of it. And the other 50% is going to be done by the other 8 people, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying. Oh, here we go.
For meetings, business-oriented thing, administration, and so forth, and design systems rather than do the coding. And the thing that I usually tell people happens when you do that is that you get detached from the actual coding.
Right. Especially if the libraries change or the techniques change or something fundamental has changed. Because a lot of stuff, let's be honest, a lot of stuff that we built all the previous software on, it's got to go. It's bad. It's terrible. It's not good. It's flaky. It takes too many people have been in it. It all has to go. It's all up. Put it this way. It can be there. It's fine. It's working. But it's all up for direct competition because of how many people it takes to be involved with those systems. How much they're actually what is the consequential complexity, the stuff you have to deal with to get the problem solved. And then there's this the inconsequential complexity, which has been added on because people wanted to have jobs, right? That's all up for grabs. Like this industry standard, best practices, all that stuff. It's all up for grabs, especially with the AI stuff where and like I'm a KMP developer, so I'm seeing that it takes one language, one set of libraries. You can do web, you can do Android, you can do iOS, you can do desktop. That's not just Mac desktop. That's Linux. That's Windows. That's what's the next Mac? All of them. Every next one that comes, watches, whatever comes along. I don't have to go learn another damn API when they're all doing the same damn thing anyway and copying from each other and just taking some from here, some from there. It's like everyone's just mixing it all together. No, I invented it. Oh, I invented it. Oh, really? You invented it? You mean there's been 35 other packages doing the same thing? You just kind of took some of the best ones and then like threw other stuff away that made needed. I don't know. So there's a lot of that going on. Now with Kotlin KMP, that's all coming to an end, right? There's going to be one layer to do all your stuff you need to do. It'll be native, so you can always drop down to whatever native platform you have to do your crazy thing. But most of the app will be built in some common core language that makes sense, has been thought out, and not just half-assed because it needed to get out this quarter. They're like the people at JetBrains have been working 10 years on Kotlin. And it's just basically people are coming, what do you mean? Or you can do multiple platforms. You can do iOS. No way. You just don't have to go digging around and all these different APIs and all these. Don't have to have separate teams for these things. So this is all up for grabs. This is what I'm saying. All up for grabs.
Now, for the software developers, on the other hand, the most of what their focus is about is on the coding part of the thing, right? And so what usually happens
what they think. That's what they've been trained as. The typey is software development. It's not. It's all this other stuff. It's like, What problem are we solving? How can we apply it? How much do they want to be they want to be using our app? Is that really a key thing? Or do they want to get in our app as quickly as possible, as little interactions as possible to get their issue completed somehow? That's a whole other mindset. It's like, what's the KPI? How many hours a day are they in our app? We want them 0. A lot of people just want 0. I want to press a button and I want the thing to happen, whatever thing is going to happen. I don't want to have to go do the digit. Can I analyze the data? It's like, no, they don't want to do that. Most people just don't want to do that, man. And they don't want to write their own thing either. I want to use the thing to write my tool. It's like, no, they want somebody else to handle it if they could and go on to doing something else they're interested in. I know this is hard to believe for computer people that they actually not want to be on their phone doing whatever it is that you want them to do. They want to be doing something else. I know, it's very shocking.
Is that you have two groups that have now created a divide between them, whereas the thing that you are describing should exist within the same, like it should be within the software developer to do this, but it's not happening.
Right, because of academia. I gotta say this as well. A lot of this is trade secrets. A lot of this stuff is like, hey, if we let people know actually how to write this stuff that was easy, fast, and required 1/10 the number of people, and you can still deploy it, we may have problems, guys. We may have problems with small developers taking our lunch, if you don't know what I mean. If you know what I mean. Don't know what I mean. So a lot of this stuff is trade secret, and I think some of it's psyops, honestly. All this conference-driven development, all this book-driven development. Oh, you got solid code and code complete and cracking the code interview and leak codes and all that stuff. That's just like the surface level stuff, and honestly, it's kind of one of the easiest level. It's all this other stuff, like how you talk to your customer, how you find a customer, how you talk to them, how you create something that they want to use that's better than what they're doing now by at least a half, by like 50%. It's like, so you can get some early adopters, so you can get some traction on trying thing, or knowing there's probably not a good time to do it, or it's not a good, your good solution is bad, or it's going to be too expensive to support, all that stuff. There's ways that all that stuff's open for attack now. That's why just
happening usually because of one very specific reason, and that is that most software developers don't really consider long-term planning or alignment or things like that.
Right, because a lot of them they're 2 years. They're going to do their 2-year stint here because everything's short-term. Because employers have got this industrial mindset. Everyone's a replaceable cog. No, we're not replaceable cogs in knowledge work. Down here in these groups, these people, these tunnels of fake agile doom, Scrum Coach Death Marches, Cargo Culting, Dungeon Grinds, Jira Burn Down Slog, Feature Factory, all these things right here, they always think that we're all replaceable, right? It's like, well, we're not. Now, some of us are. Some of us actually are, but not all of us, right? And they can't tell the difference because they get up into management. Everything looks like a black box. You throw resources at it, things come out of it, and you're just gonna make it 2 profitable quarters, and you're good. Good to go. Just need to get up a little bit, one level of management, so you can get some people to blame and take orders from. I mean, this is the game.
What usually software developers will do, which is not that great all the time, is that they will think about everything that they do as a project or in a product-oriented mindset. It's very similar to how designers work. You give them a specification for what they're supposed to design, and then they design that thing, usually in isolation, without any thought of long-term scaling or things like that, or fitting something into a larger ecosystem. Because now their job is done. Same thing with the software developers. You give them a ticket or a story card, they fix that thing, and then they move on to the next one. Now the problem with that is, I made this analogy to a road. It's like you're asking them to make a brick, and then you take that brick and you put it on the road. The problem is that if you only know how to make a brick, or like a cobblestone or something like that, and you don't actually think about how that's going to fit into the overall road you're dealing with, you're going to have a really bumpy road. To make it a smooth and nice experience, you need to have people who understand that bigger perspective. Now,
Right. You have to have a bigger perspective. You have to have some design up front. We have to have some idea of which way we're going to go up this mountain to see if we can even detect the cavern opening. And then once we see the cavern opening, we identify the kind of creature we're dealing with, the customer needs. With the customer needs, and like he's going to be wily and squishy, and he's not going to be too easy giving up his secrets. But he's guarding the chalice that we all are going after, which can mean different things to different people. Sometimes it's just money. Sometimes it's fame. Sometimes it's fuck you to somebody. There's a lot of that motivation going on. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So this bigger perspective, when you're down here in a silver horde, you're doing dev agency, someone brings you a problem there, they can't get their developers to work on it and do it properly. Let me hold on here. Yeah, my computer. computer's overheated for a second. So they can't do it properly, right? And so they come to you because you've been down here enough to like, okay, I need to get my tech skills chopped up, like super right tight. And you'll just be fighting the same damn creature every time because it's somebody that comes with their dev agency problem. It's just a series of screens and you just need to put them together. But you're avoiding going here, right? Anyone that's in a dev agency has the skill set to make the attack run, but they got to widen their mind, right? They can't be just given the customer problem. They got to go find out the customer problems. That means they actually have to talk to the customer. What?
I said, the reason why that's usually not happening is because you're offloading those sorts of responsibilities to the architect or the tech lead, or you can call it, like, the roles change all the time, guys.
Right, and that guy, he's usually come out, a tech lead has come out of these things, and he's been asked to go now do this attack. A lot of times those guys just never have done it before. And they don't know what it takes. They don't understand. You actually have to talk to the customer. Oh, talk to the customer. And a lot of times, so, and I also want to just talk about a little bit like how architecture, you can do some design up front, and you can talk about how to talk about these things. And in my series, How to Program from the Ground Up, Part 7, Software Design, the big idea, can we use drawings and diagrams to visually communicate about software designs? Yes. Yes, you can. That's most of what we do on the whiteboard. The whiteboard, when I first heard about the whiteboard, I was like, oh, we're going to do this conceptual modeling stuff. Like, because actually coding on the whiteboard, we can just sit down on the computer together, right? And we could do that. But no, you want me to code on the whiteboard? No, we do the conceptual layers, boxes, and lines. It's like here, the first law of software, the box. The second law of software design, the line. And then the conceptual layers. So you have boxes and boxes within boxes on top of boxes, and everything's conceptual, right? And then the third law of software design, you're going to have to go find what that is. You're going to go find out what that is. I'm not going to tell you. So that's kind of what I wanted to elucidate there.
You can offload that, but the reality is that both are necessary in the software developer's level in order for you to make something useful or something that really fits. This is why I tell people that there is no, you as a software developer, you sort of have to learn a bit of the domain that you're working in order to make something really useful.
Yeah, that means you got to go out and talk to a customer in the domain. The domain, you have to know something about the domains. Like you have to go actually know something about how people have problems in the real world and what the things they're pissed off and what about, and where you can apply technology or apply your skill set, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be technology. Apply your skill set to solve their problem. This is not complicated, but people make it very, very complicated. They're scared. It's scary to talk to these people and say, here, no, 1,000 times over until you finally get something that's like, oh, maybe. You know, it's like a lot of no's. And if you haven't been, if I got started in business when I was a little kid, right? I was a little young, and my first job was picking peas on a farm. 12 years old. No, I was doing cleanup yards before that, and picking up trash and shit like that, and cutting grass and mowing lawns and stuff like that. So I was doing that stuff before that. I thought I could handle a farm job. No, I didn't realize I couldn't do that. So I've been doing this type of thing. Software development. I did my first commercial contract with a local business when I was 13. Doing dental records, which failed. It failed. When I was 18, I published my first commercial package by Crap Software. It was a Crap Software game in BASIC for the IBM PC. So there's a lot of things, and that was a silver horde. That was a dev agency silver horde. Somebody came to me with that, and I already had the skill set. So I built this thing for him. I think he paid me like $500, and he went off and sold at Kmart. He must have made 10, 20,000, 30. He must have eaten a lot of money because I saw it in the Kmart and like that was just, all right, okay. That was cool seeing my product in the Kmart, but I didn't realize that I kind of got screwed on the deal. Anyway, but he was going after, right? He got a thing at Kmart. He found this opening at Kmart, and all he do is contact me to do the code for him. I wrote it in about a month or a month and a half, and then he just went and that was his dragon. That was that. So he by hook or by crook, some way, somehow, he's got his ear to the ground. He's paying attention, and that's where he found something really useful. He found his domain. Ooh.
Because if you just do the code monkey thing, you're always going to end up building really bad stuff.
Yeah, right
so
here.
The art isn't gone. It's more that there's a set of practices that most people don't follow, and some of this is redundant. So you talk about upfront design. Do you need to apply that to every single situation?
Not everyone, but if you're going to be going after something up here in adventure driven, if you're going to be looking for cave entrance, you kind of have to, and you're going to be communicating to other people. A lot of times this happens before you communicate to people. You've already discussed it somehow, some way, and you already got your people lined up just verbally. But coders, we need to see this visual stuff. A lot of us are very visual. So box line diagram stuff is key to communicating your ideas.
Diagrams, are they useful all the time? Documentation, is that useful? Well, yeah, yes and no, it is. Modeling, well, you're modeling things all the time, but I think that you're talking about is like UML type of things where you like on paper model out how the system is going to work.
I mean, there may be a time and a place for that, like when you go into legacy mode. But why would you even do that anyway? You don't need to do that, and you would never do them by hand. You would always use like plant UML or whatever. Use programming description language, and that would generate the UML. Okay, that's sort of useful, I guess.
These things are still happening. They're always happening in a healthy team and so forth. It's just that you don't take the time to document or write down all the things that you're talking about, and that's the idea.
Right, the tacit knowledge. It calls tacit. So most of software development, I know I hate this. People hate to hear this. Most of it's tacit knowledge. The documentation is like 5%, and then the code is like 1%. Right? There's all this other knowledge that has to happen. And management doesn't like to hear about this, but that knowledge is extremely valuable. And when you let people go, you let go. That's the value you're letting go. And when you let your knowledge workers go and you keep the source code behind thinking you've got the thing, even though it's operating and running and things are going for a while, but the tacit knowledge of all the people that left, it's like I always wondered, because back when I first got started, they value that people stay at these companies, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and before they would even think about going. And a lot of times the companies would fail or get bought out, and they would move on, get cashed out and move on. I've seen both those things happen. So. But yeah, here we go.
Well, it's not necessarily the idea, but that has more of a lean process idea behind it, because
I hate that word lean. I talk about lean a little bit in this series, but lean is very much a top-down thing where it's something, we're going to start a little startup spin-off things. Like that's, I don't even know if you can do it that way, but coming out with that we're going to cut it way down to the wick. It's like, that's the wrong attitude. It's really what you want to do is adventure-driven. Where, yes, you're only given the limited resources, limited time. Yes, that's true. But you're not going to we're going to cut it down to the quick. It's like, well, we might have to spend some money on this. You might have to spend some money somewhere to make this thing happen. So it's not necessarily lean, but it's got the similar ideas, but this is more courage and creativity based. There are more than one ways to solve problems. And a lot of people just give up and they want to go hire somebody else to do it. And you can't do that in adventure driven. You really have to. You have to be down. You have to be willing to go down in here and do dirty jobs. You have to be willing to do dirty jobs because adventure driven, there's a bunch of stuff that you just don't want to do. You just really don't want to do, right? And you're going to try to figure a way to, even though it's not scalable, you're going to find a way to automate that or get rid of it somehow or whatever that task is. But usually the first run up to the cave entrance where you're trying to see if you even have traction somewhere, it's always going to be a mess.
If you do the waterfall thing, then
scary.
It doesn't.
Time consuming and could fail. Likely to fail. So that's why it's best to instead of going just head down and go into a silver horde and one of these things is keep your eyes open, right? Just realize these are temporary situations for people that are adventure driven. Now, for people that are I would love to have that job security, it's not for them. We should not be in tech at all. Anyway, if you think job security is anywhere in here, let's keep going.
Have to be waterfall. I hope you understand what I'm saying. But if you do the upfront investment and do all the documentation and things like that, which is still happening, that might actually end up being really bad for you because we walked away from that.
All upfront. Yes. Bad idea. Every little thing down to the little details. No, you don't need to do everything like that. But you need to okay, we're going to have a customer record. Well, what kind of things do we track? Name, address, phone number, GPS location, pictures taken. I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff. What are you doing? What is your problem that you're trying to help solve? All that stuff has to be in there. But UML diagrams, all the relational database, everything put together. I don't know if you need all that.
Due to the fact that it takes longer, it's a theoretical exercise, and it's a way for you to model something that you don't truly understand until you start coding a little bit, so that you have some type of blueprint to follow. As I said, the problem with that is that it might not reflect reality. Documentation needs to be updated, and documentation needs to be maintained, and when you start coding, you might find out that your theoretical upfront abstraction that you created doesn't actually fit. You have oversights, which is the reason why we can't ever find a good time estimate for most things, because the reality of coding is that you might plan for something, then you do a little bit of work and you realize that the plan has to change because you have new insights, and then you do a little bit of coding, and then you have new insights, and you continue that process until the thing is shipped.
Right, and that is adventure driven. That's the whole thing. It's a cycle, right? You do some design up front, and as you go through it, you change. I know this is hard to believe. You change it based on what you find. And also ADD is kind of like set up like, hey man, these things we're gonna write it and then we're gonna throw it away and then we're gonna write another one based on what we found. And if that's not part of it, you may not. We're not gonna ship MVPs to production. I mean, maybe once in a while if we're lucky, but usually the prototype and the MVP are both thrown away, and that's in ADD. And then that third one is after you've got so the prototype is just to see where you're coming from, where the code, how we structure things. MVP, you might put the MVP in production just to see if you get traction up to your first 5,000 customers, whatever. But as soon as you get a few hundred customers and it looks like you're making money, maybe you should plan on getting rid of that one or let it have its life in the sun, and then come out with your next one based on that. And don't try and save it or just modify a little bit. It's like, no, we're gonna throw that one away. Let's get into the habit of throwing software away, and then taking the good stuff and keep moving with it, right? That is definitely adventure driven.
That does not work usually if you have all this upfront documentation and investment and so forth and so forth. The sweet spot, I will argue, is if you can do both, where you have enough documentation and modeling alignment at each step that you're taking. So you basically talk about what you're going to build, create a shared vision of the code that is going to be shipped, and how to do certain things. You can document that. Then you move forward.
It's very difficult to do this with a team. Usually it's one person in adventure driven that's doing a lot of this stuff, this tech stuff. They're talking to a business person who has a domain, or sometimes it's the same person, but oftentimes you have a developer and a business person, and the business person has been down in these things and seen what they're like, so they're not dumb. They're not dumb or ignorant about what's involved here. So they have the ability to like, oh, I understand you're trying to cut things out so we can limit the scope, so we can actually see if we can get customers from here in the time we have allotted, right? If we can find how we even got any kind of product market fit here at all, while we have time before we have to like go get a job or go work for another company for a little while we figure this out on the side. But you should be kind of like working in these positions and figuring this out on the side. That's how most of this stuff happens.
Forward. Realize that the world changed and the code changed, and then you update those documents that you've created, and then you take the next step. This is where the human factor becomes a problem, because very, very few, I would say no one, I've never met, apart from myself, honest to God, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but apart from myself, I've never seen a software team who has a plan for how to keep their documentation updated and relevant. And it's actually, I've told you 100 times, guys, it's actually as simple as just having a monthly review of your documentation. That's all you.
Well, or just having it all in one place. That's why I'm a big fan of like these GitHub and GitLab. You can put your project there. You put all the documentation there. You can put your UML diagrams and stuff are now in code. And having it all in one place as a text thing and keeping it all in one place is one way to keep the documentation up to date. But also just realize the documentation is kind of a work in progress, and for your team to just get on the same page, because most of this knowledge is going to be tacit, and you're not going to be able to document all of it. So even though he's like, oh, I just review of your documentation, this doesn't really work like that. The documentation is more like so we're all on the same page and ideas. So that's why you don't want to go super deep with it. So there's levels of documentation. There's documentation for your development team. There's documentation for like other like your users. That has to be different. That has to be kept up to date, of course. But if you can create software that doesn't require user guides, that's even better, right? You don't even need that stuff. You've made it so simple and straightforward and obvious how to use your software. You don't need help user guides. Now you may do a YouTube video that shows how everything works, but maybe you don't need a user guide. Maybe it's not necessary.
You need, but nobody does it because of the human factor. Humans are lazy and forgetful, and as I've said,
it's just incentives, right? If this documentation, if they knew the user documentation they were keeping up to date is keeping down the number of calls that allows them to take home an extra $1 an hour, or eliminate somebody in customer support because your product doesn't need that level of support, or that it's mostly automated away. Then it makes sense to make the documentation better, right? If you're on call for these things every once in a while, like if you are adventure driven, you are on call. It's your product, right? It's usually one person starting out doing these things. If developers are put on call, then this becomes an incentive, right? If there's no incentive, there's like why would they do it? Come on now.
as well. This is my personal take on humanity. If you want a human to do something over time, you have to either have a physical limitation or an incentive system. If you don't have any of those two things, it's not going to happen. And this is the reason why I argue that this is what you think is happening, that the software design is getting lost, or like that art is going away. It's not. It's just that we have moved to a workflow where people don't have to do it anymore because the architect is no longer doing it for the software developers, and they don't feel like they need to because they can progress without having to do it. So the value of the thing that you were talking about falls.
Right. They just want to be in one of these silver hordes or lead mines or dungeon grinds. It's the people that are okay with that and are just fine. Like, oh, this is software development, just grinding it out there because they got something else they were doing, right? This is a job to them. They're just grinding it out. They did elite code grinding. Now they just give me the ticket. I do the thing. This is software development for them. So they don't even know that there's other things out there. There's adventure-driven stuff is available because without the KMP, without Kotlin, so trying to do these kinds of projects on your own, it's just like, dude, so much crap to deal with. All these platforms, even though they're doing almost exactly the same thing, have their own little flavor and little way to do it. I like to do it this way, and I like to make my TypeScript type definition code Turing complete. It's like, dude, totally missing the point. You know, how is this giving value to the customer? Who's the customer? That's a good question. Who is the customer here? Are you trying to are you getting graded on lines of code generated? Because that's a great way to do it. But if we're trying to how much profit can I take? Can I get myself into a position where I'm developing more value than 10 other people, and I can make my living off of delivering that value to people? What the hell? What are we doing here?
So way due to usually pure laziness. It is still happening, just not in the way it used to happen when someone had it as a full-time profession to do it. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, designs, diagrams, documentation, modeling is still happening. It's just that it might not be as frequent as you or may have been exposed to in the past, because usually these sorts of things are more administrative tasks, which the software developers themselves don't really do because they're interested in the coding part and the delivery and all of this sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff an architect might be more inclined to do. But
right, but when adventure-driven development, you want to minimize all that stuff, right? But you still need to do some of it. If you're going to be working on a team with other people, there has to be some level of coordination. But don't try and make it like, well, this is the definition of everything we know. It's like, that's not possible. Don't try. And expecting people to keep it updated when all this tacit knowledge is always flying around anyway, and expecting them also to make their job replaceable is a little bit silly. But it's definitely a motivating factor for a lot of people.
But since more and more teams are going towards an agile DevOps type of orientation, fewer and fewer architects are found. And the reality is that the higher up you go as an architect, the more decoupled you get from the actual coding. And so your documentation basically becomes a very expensive Notion page or a Confluence page somewhere.
Yeah. So architects that don't code, that's a silly thing. That's just make work stuff. This is someone who's, I moved up to the management. Coding is below me. That's ridiculous. Architects that don't code, I gotta look at the side eye. The fuck? How does that work, motherfucker? Do you even know about these libraries? Do you even know they change? Do you even know KMP exists? Do you even know that you can use one language to go on all these different platforms? You don't have to go dick around with all these different JavaScript, Node.js. Like, dude, no. Builds Webpack build systems. Like, dude, no. Holy crap. Anyway, the answer to all that stuff is, of course, adventure-driven development. And I'm Chris Athanas. Tech Support's coming out Tuesday. Give me a like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.